performed an admirable public service, and so thank you all.
Welcome to the second forum of the Congressional Black Caucus's Emergency Task Force on Black Youth Suicide and Mental Health. I need to start by saying thank you to my colleagues who've obviously changed their schedules in order to be present here today for this important event. We launched this caucus with two core missions: to identify comprehensive legislation that will result in solutions that will reverse the growing trend of Black youth and broader youth suicide, and to raise awareness and sound the alarm so that the parents, the educators, and other community members understand what's happening and what to look for in their own children. There is often no better way to raise awareness than to rely on the voices of well-known icons in our community, and we're blessed to have one here with us today. I'm incredibly grateful to have award-winning actress Taraji P. Henson here with us today, and as an ally on this issue. In order to maximize our time, I want to briefly introduce her and move into our testimony so that we have time for questions. I need you to know that she is an award-winning actress. She is very accomplished and very diverse on her platforms, but she is also an activist, a community activist, and someone who cares very deeply about issues that affect the quality of health and well-being in our community. In 2018, she founded the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, named for her father, who suffered from mental health challenges as a result of his tour on duty in the Vietnam War. And the foundation is committed to changing the perception of mental illness in the African American community by encouraging those who suffer with debilitating illnesses to get the help that they need. Since its launch, the organization has conducted several listening sessions with therapists, social workers, educators, and mental health leaders across the nation. And it has worked closely with numerous high-risk schools to provide support for teachers, staff, mental health trainings, organized adult and youth advisory council, and currently working with partners to help develop trauma-informed curricula. Today's hearing represents the second actual committee hearing. It is our desire to take this information on the road across the country, to talk to those who are, we have some of our working group here, thank you for being here, to work with our professionals, to work with parents, educators, teachers, everyone that has an opportunity to observe our children in their daily lives so that they can look for the signs that they need to intervene on their behalf. And so with that, I'd like to turn this over now to Ms. Henson and give her the opportunity to address us.
Talk? Oh, wow. Thank you so much for having me here. I am here out of necessity. I founded this foundation because there was a problem. My father passed away in '06. 2 years prior to that, my son's father was murdered here in Washington, D.C. That's trauma, not only for my son, but for myself. When he was becoming a young man, not having his important male figures to look up to call upon, questions about becoming a young African American male in America, how does that work? What do I need to do? We didn't have it. And I noticed we started having some issues. It was time to seek help. When it was time to look for someone who I felt I could trust and also my son could trust, it was like looking for a unicorn. And I called my best friend, who is the executive director of my foundation, the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, Tracy Jenkins. And we started doing our own research, and it dawned on me the reason why we don't have many psychiatrists, not that we don't have them, that they're not easily accessible, is because we in the African American community, we don't deal with mental health issues. We don't even talk about it. We've been taught to pray our problems away. We've been demonized for coming out saying we have issues, and we have trust issues. I need the person sitting opposite from me when I go seek help for my mental to be culturally competent. And if you're not culturally competent, how can I trust you? with my deepest secrets, and with my vulnerability. So this foundation was founded, like I said, out of a necessity. I also, before becoming an actress, successful actress, I was a substitute teacher. I opted to teach special education children. When I got my credentials and I started to go out into the world and sub, I got sent to Crenshaw. And I thought I was going to a school for special needs kids. And when I got there, I was in a room full of all black young males labeled special ed. None of them were in wheelchairs. They could all speak. They could walk. They had all of their facilities. As I stayed in the school, I started talking to the young men. Of course, I started finding out that they were going home to parents, no parents being home. One kid was found walking along the train tracks, wandering, no parents at home. One kid was arrested for stealing, just merely wanted to eat, needed something to eat because there were no parents at home. At a 7-Eleven, he got caught stealing. Just things were not right with me. That sat with me and it bothered me because I'm raising a young black man. And when I proceeded to try and teach these young men, they believed this label that had been placed upon them. I'm special ed, Ms. Henson, I can't learn that. Another thing that bothered me was children normalizing shootouts. I got to school another day, and kids are grabbing me by the hand, and they're going, Ms. Henson, look, there was a shootout last night, pointing to the bullet holes in the walls of their school, laughing. We're expecting these children to come from traumatic experiences at home, and we're expecting them to go to school and learn, and it's just not fair. We can't give up on our kids, and I think that's where it starts. I think we implement mental illness or mental health as education in school. It needs to be a subject, just like sex education was, a physical education. We need to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the more people will feel like they can talk about it. I really don't know how to fix this problem. I just know that this suicide rate is rising. I just know the ages of the children that are committing suicide are getting younger and younger. It breaks my heart to know that 5-year-old children are contemplating life and death. Sorry, that one is tough for me. So I'm here to appeal to you because this is a national crisis. When I hear of kids going into bathrooms, cutting themselves, you're supposed to feel safe at school. I'm here using my celebrity, using my voice to put a face to this. Because I also suffer from depression and anxiety. And if you're a human living in today's world, I don't know how you're not suffering in any way. I mean, if you turn on the news, that's PTSD right there. We need each other. This is me reaching across the table, trying to lend a helping hand in the best way I can. We have to save our children.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. So we're legislators and we're appropriators. And we know that this problem exists.
Yeah.
With youth, mental health deficiency, and the uptick in suicide. We believed that it was an opportunity to elevate this discussion on a national level, so therefore we have this emergency task force. And we call it an emergency task force. We want it to be of limited duration so that it gets to the heart of things, and then we can get together and have a report as the best practices, where the deficiencies lie, and what we as members need to fight for. We can do the legislative piece, We can do the appropriations piece, but it is a voice like yours
Yes.
that helps to elevate the discussion so that people will react to it, and that the members of Congress will recognize that this is indeed a national crisis and one that we should not be having. So I'm really grateful for you taking your time to be here. I'm grateful for your founding, I should say, the foundation that is working with children in schools right now that looks at the issue for our whole community. And we definitely want to be a partner with you. And
Yes.
so if you don't mind, I'd like to turn this over to my colleagues to have an exchange with you about some things that you've observed in the work that you're doing and some questions that they might have. And since we're in this wonderful district, hopefully one day state, Eleanor Holmes Norton, amen, I'd like to start with the representative.
Well, I want to thank Representative Watson Coleman for her initiative with this issue. And I can't say enough for you, Ms. Henson, for taking time from what must be a very glamorous schedule to come to the unglamorous Congress of the United States. Is it the case that you were born and raised in the District of Columbia?
Yes, ma'am. Born and raised.
Well, I am very pleased then.
And I went to Howard University.
Oh, my heavens. How many more kudos can she get? So you see, this is a product of our hometown. And if you needed any other reason why you should support D.C. statehood, there you got it, sitting right before you. I am struck, Ms. Henson, with the information we have gathered in this task force about the ages of these children. Suicide had been fairly rare in the African American community. Maybe that's because we didn't note it. Maybe it was there, but like so much else, we didn't understand it and didn't note it. So if I were to focus on any group within the African American community, I would be troubled by these statistics that show that very young children, I'm talking about too young to even know the word suicide, 5 to 11, then some incidents 12 to 14. Is there any information on why children, and here I want to quote from the report we have, a recent report, 2017, more than a third of elementary school-age children suicides involve Black children, compared to 11.6% of early adolescent suicides. What in the world is happening in our community? Is there any information you have that would inform us about these suicides among very young children?
I just think that social media plays a big part of that. So, you know, we need awareness, and that's where we start with the children. So we need awareness in schools, and we need therapists there to guide them through this social media-driven world. We can't just introduce social media to all children and not give them a guideline, and that seems to be what's going on. It started off as really cool, but now we have a problem because kids are looking up to these filtered pictures and these filtered lives, and it's just not true. It's not reality. So they need guidance. A lot of the parents aren't even on social media. They're kind of like new to it, some of them. You know, so that's where we need to come in as a community and teach our children how to maneuver through social media, or to teach them that it's not that important. But we have to have the conversations. We are expecting them to get it on their own, and they're not getting it.
So in a real sense, this is on us, and I hope we all understand this. When a child commits suicide, there's no place to look but in the mirror at ourselves. Could I ask one more question? First, let me thank you for your candor in saying in your testimony that you had had depression. Now, there's some indication that maybe these children, if they had been treated for depression, or for that matter, others who attempt suicide, might not have done so had the depression been treated. Would you tell us about your experience and about what you think about depression as a factor, if it is, in suicides among children?
Oh, depression is definitely a factor in suicide. Some people feel lows and they can get themselves out of it. And then there's a clinical depression where you just lose all hope. But if you don't have the resources to get the help, see, I have the resource. I'm blessed. I can afford, mental care, which is not even really the best plan with my insurance company, and I make a lot of money. So, that's another issue. People aren't able to get the help that they need, even if they wanted to, even if they were bold enough to say, as Charlamagne always says, it's okay to not be okay. If they're bold enough and vulnerable enough to say, I'm not okay, I need help, they still have nowhere to get it because there are no resources, there are no funds. We are barely able to go get a checkup. We know the state of health care right now in this country. So, if you add mental health in the mix, we don't have the resources. Most people don't have the money. Most people don't even have insurance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And if you're in New Jersey and you have insurance but you have a need, you can't always find a counselor that can address your needs.
Right.
There is a severe deficiency in a number of black psychologists or black psychiatrists. There's also a deficiency in those who may not be black but have the cultural competence
That part.
to deal with our children and to recognize their value. And every one of us knows somebody and has somebody in our family that's had that need. I wanted to introduce part of our working group who is here today, Dr. Michael Lindsay and Dr. Alfie Breland Noble, who are a big part of this group to help us find our way here. I don't know if there's any other member of the working group. Could you stand up so we could acknowledge you, please? Thank you. Thank you. And I also want to announce that we have a radio personality in the room who has a story that is worth telling and sharing and empowers our youth, be they female or male. Charlamagne, who is here with us today, who's also agreed to be a part of our working group. We're going to work you to death today. Thank you. I'd now like to recognize our Representative Ilhan Omar.
No, I forgot to push my talk button. Thank you, Congresswoman Watson-Coleman, for gathering us again to have this important conversation. It's such an honor to see you here, Ms. Henson. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you.
And I'm a fan of the work that you're doing. When we had our working group present to us at our first hearing, we had a lot of important discussions about what it meant to have cultural competency trainings for mental health providers, some of the barriers that might exist in getting some of our communities to become mental health providers. And the cultural, I think, misnorms that exist within our communities about mental health. I shared the story about how, as an African, as a Somali, we don't have a word for mental health. It's crazy, and that's it. Right? Nothing else. We don't have a single word in the Somali language to describe anything else. And I know that is true for many of the African languages. And so there is a huge barrier, and many of the important points that you brought up was about us as a Black community having to suffer in silence.
Yeah.
We are often, like you said, are told to pray it away, to keep it to ourselves, that silence is strength, vulnerability is a weakness, that there must be some sort of inability for you to count your blessings if you are having issues. And so with many of these factors existing, I know that those of us who might have been brutalized or oppressed find many ways to protect ourselves emotionally. And being vulnerable oftentimes is too dangerous. And so when you talked about the little kids who showed up in class and made fun of the drive-by shootings, that kind of normalization isn't that they probably don't understand the magnitude of what's happening, but it's a protection, right? We're not gonna constantly dwell on this. It just is, this is our reality. And so we're gonna figure out how to just get past it. And so if we're going to address this particular crisis that we have to figure out ways, like you said, to have it be incorporated within our educational system. And one of the things that I discussed with Charmaine when he was backstage was social emotional learning being part of the curriculums that we have in our schools. We take time to educate kids on physical health. We also do sexual health education. And I can't really understand why we wouldn't think it would be important for us to teach kids about their feelings and the importance of not blocking those feelings. And so we're interested in introducing legislation that will add that as part of curriculums around the country. And so my question to you is, as you've had conversations and surveyed young people, educators, what are your thoughts around this particular concept and how we can move the needle in this particular area?
Well, it starts in the education system because we can't rely on the parents who are oftentimes broken and dealing with their own, either they're dealing with it or they're not where they are mentally. So that's when we have to rely on the school and the education system, because how you affect it's almost like you can even affect the parent through the kid, because if they're coming home with this homework, and if you're a parent who helps children, your kids with their homework, then this is a discussion now you're having in the home. See, that's why we have to start in the school. I think that's the smartest way to attack this crisis, is to start in school. Because from school is where you take this conversation home to the parent, and you're kind of forced to have to talk about it. And hopefully the parent is affected in a good way, and the whole entire family gets help. But right now the crisis is with the children, and I think that's the perfect way to do it, is to implement it in the school, in the curricula. I also believe that our children, because that's definitely a great way to do it, but also, I just believe our children don't think we care about them. I honestly believe that, and if I were a kid right now, I would think so. We have all kinds of expos in the cities. We do the Black Women Expo. We do every kind of expo you can think of. Every city gets excited about the Super Bowl or the All-Star Game. But who's getting excited about our kids? Where are the teen summits? Children are entrepreneurs. Where are their expos? And I think this is a time where the adults, we have to pick the ball up and take care of our children, because they can't do it on their own. I'm noticing a rise in children, also freshmen, going off to college, having serious coping issues. They are having psychotic breaks. This one is a little personal, I'm sorry. But they're having psychotic breaks because they don't feel included, or they're, it's the damage of social media. And we have to turn this boat around, or we're gonna lose humanity. And it starts with the kids. We need to focus on our children now.
And a society that forgets to fix their children
Yeah.
sets themselves up for a broken future. I visited a community health center in my district last month. And in our visit, we did a tour, and so they showed me the area where a lot of the young people who might be seeking mental health help come in. And it used to say the intake center. And we talked about that the last time, that language oftentimes impacts the ways that people access services. And so intake was sort of a reminder of maybe a social service or police stations, all of these unpleasant thoughts, and young people would come in and see that sign and they would leave. Mm-hmm. And so the center, run by an amazing African-American woman, decided that they were going to change that because they wanted to make sure that the young people understood that this was a connecting point. So they changed it to a community connection center.
Much better.
And much better. But one of the other things that they were struggling with is that, especially with adolescents, that there weren't enough psychologists to treat them. And I know that's part of one of the things that you're advocating for and that your foundation is looking at. Can you think about what the barriers might be for members of our community to entering that field, and what that would mean in having many of them be part of that field so that we could feel more comfortable in seeking services?
Okay, well, when we started doing our research, it's not that they don't exist, they're there. It's not, we don't have a lot, but that's going to change because we're starting to talk about it. They're there, it's just how do we find them? Mm-hmm. So my foundation, one of the things we're trying to do is on our website, pool them all together, right? So this way sometimes people have a problem going in, they feel, oh God, I have to go sit on a sofa. It's so much stigma around it. So to remove some of that stigma, if we make it like, you can go through our website, your therapist could be in Florida, your therapist could be in New Jersey, and you can be in North Carolina, but you can Skype with them. You can have a phone conversation. See, I don't think people know that these are ways to get the help that they need. So once I think that can help. That can certainly help, because I know I travel a lot, and I can't physically go see my therapist all the time, but when I find myself in a bind or in a low, I can certainly call her. I can certainly FaceTime her. So making our community understand that it's just like when you go find any doctor. It's, do you vibe with this person or not? It's not, you have to keep going until you find the right person, the right energy. Yeah. So it's just educating and talking. The more and more we talk about it, the more people will feel comfortable enough to talk about it.
And one important piece I know that in your foundation is offering scholarships.
Absolutely.
To young people to enter that field. And we know that many of the barriers to our communities in seeking a healthcare degree is the cost.
Yes.
And a lot of our communities are burdened with student debt, even as they finish their four-year education. And so to accelerate that becomes a bigger burden, not just on themselves, but also on the community. And so we're hoping that our fine colleagues and the community will join us in our advocacy in trying to cancel out student debt.
Yeah.
So more people have the opportunity to have whatever promise they want fulfilled.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Representative. In addition to making sure that we have some kind of training or education at the school level, we need to look at the educators and the kind of training that they get. And associated with their certification to teach or counsel, we need to make sure that they have that competency as well.
Absolutely.
Congresswoman, maybe speaking.
Don't wish that on me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and particularly Ms. Henson, thank you for coming and exposing yourself in some ways and your experiences and your family. Charlemagne, thank you for as well speaking for Black men and the experiences and not being afraid to expose that part of yourself as well. I think that that's something that I know you spoke about vulnerability and being comfortable and showing your vulnerability, and that's something we as Black people have difficulty doing because what has happened to us historically when we do that. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about the specifics of what your organization does, because I think that's important for people to hear as an example of kind of what some nonprofits are doing in this space.
Well, first of all, we started off with a listening tour because put it on the table, hey, we have a problem. So long we've been sweeping it under the carpet. Now people feel like they can at least talk about it. Trying to get trained professionals in schools who can recognize a child suffering from a traumatic situation instead of labeling them special ed and pointing them in the right direction, getting them the help that they really need. We're also tackling recidivism in the prison systems. You gotta realize over half of the prison population are in there because they have mental issues. And recidivism happens because that issue hasn't been dealt with. So they find themselves back in prison again because the problem that landed them in prison was never dealt with. And also by giving scholarships to young African Americans so that we won't have this problem anymore. The lack of therapists, culturally competent African American therapists.
Yes.
Hopefully that won't be the tale 5 or 10 years from now.
You know, this weekend I had the honor of being with someone who doesn't even, I think, realize that he's working in this space, is Tim Duncan, the NBA player. And he started a program in San Antonio and has moved it to the Virgin Islands, where he has a program called Yes We Can. And it's for elementary school students to engender positivity in their life. That we don't often speak positive things and letting our children know that they can do things, that they're resilient, that they're strong. And it's an app that's been created that allows them to interact at their grade level to feel positive about themselves and what their future holds, as opposed to what they see around them. And I think that having tools like that in schools are really important. And I know from your experience as a teacher, how do you think we can prepare teachers? What kind of funding and stuff would be necessary to make teachers be mental health first responders?
Well, they need to get training. I mean, I'm no professional, but I know that when I was a substitute teacher, I was no professional, but I could pinpoint because I care, and because I wasn't afraid to tackle mental health issues. I could see through a different lens. But you're talking about teachers who haven't even. I mean, you know, some teachers don't even think about it like that because they're not professionals. Right. They think the school counselor does that, you know. So I think teachers need to be trained. Teachers absolutely need to be trained. We also are in schools right now painting positive mantras in bathrooms. My executive director also told me when she was working at one of the schools in here in DC, she would oftentimes find our kids in there cutting. That was never a part of our culture before. And now they're cutting in the bathrooms. And, you know, I know growing up, bathrooms were very dark. They almost looked like dungeons, very dark and gray. It's a place where you can't go contemplate suicide, or you can go get jumped or bullied.
Right.
So we're even changing that. I mean, it's something small, but it's a start. And we've even allowed spaces for young people to write their own positive thoughts down, you know, so that when you go to the bathroom, it's not this dark place.
Right. Well, this is, you talk about this being personal. I have 4 sons, and they range in age from 30 to 18. And when you talk about unsafe in schools, and more often than not, when we think about school environments being unsafe, we think about gangs, we think about schools that are labeled as bad. But I've had the experience where you have sons in good schools. But those are sometimes very unsafe for African American men, because oftentimes they're the only one in that classroom, or they are the one that stand out the most. And that has been, I've had to deal with sons who are still dealing with depression, still dealing with issues. And finding someone in the school that they can trust is often very difficult when they're the minority in a majority white school. Whether that's at secondary school, elementary, and particularly when they get to the college level. If they're not at an HBCU or a school where the majority of people look like them, and we can't all go to HBCUs, that becomes an issue that we as African Americans need to deal with, is finding safe places for our children. This week, I had an incident here in the District of Columbia with a relative who went to what is considered one of the better schools in DC, and leaving the school, there are other children waiting for them, waiting for African American boys to try and jump because they don't go to the schools that they go to. And how do we as a community find community outlets? And I didn't know if you would talk about a little bit about other community centers, safe places for our young people to go to after school, that can provide a safe haven for them, where depression can be identified, vulnerabilities can be identified, that it's a safe place for all of our kids, and recognizing that we may not all look alike or even live alike, but our experiences are the same.
That's something that, I had the same issue with my son. You want the best education you can give them. You want them to have a better education than you had, and then you look back as a parent, did I do the right thing? Because they walk away scarred and something you can't fix. That is an initiative, I think it should be required in every school where all the kids don't look alike. That should just be required curricula for all of us to discuss our differences.
Right.
We shouldn't just talk about Black people in February.
Right.
You know what I mean? We shouldn't just celebrate Latino people, Cinco de Mayo. You know what I mean?
Right,
we should
right.
talk about each other's culture every day.
And it shouldn't be that one Black person who has to give the explanation for everybody in the classroom
Absolutely.
about Black folks.
That's right. I think the bottom line is education. I wish I was a billionaire, because I would just go around the world building community centers, because I remember when I was a kid, I had those options. Say what you want to say about Mayor Marion Barry, but he kept me off the streets. I had a job every summer. And that's what's missing. These kids have nowhere to go, nowhere to be. All they have is time on their hands, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
They have time and social media.
Yeah.
Very dangerous combination.
I'll leave with this. This past weekend, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke had an event in New York, and they were talking about a lot of issues. And one of the issues was crime and criminal justice. And she had the district attorney of Brooklyn there. And it ends up that he and I grew up in the same projects in Brooklyn. And the way we knew that we grew up in the same project, because he was like, I don't know if she really grew up there. He was like, you remember Miss Barbara? And Miss Barbara was a Black woman who had a community center for all of us after school, whether you went to private schools, public schools, parochial schools. Everybody was there, And I said, you know, come on now. Miss Barber had me run around that block 5 times, you know, for coming in late or something like that. And he's like, oh, yeah, you were there. And we need to create those safe places now. We don't have CEDAR program that provided, you know, jobs for young people. Remember that in the 70s? Ilhan, you're too young to remember that one. You remember for her? But these are the kinds of things that we need to bring back, and these are the ideas that you're giving us as the appropriators. Bonnie Watson-Coleman sits on appropriations, and those of us who sit on these committees that create the language so that we can be sure that we have the funding and the resources, and even NIH to do the research so that our children can be safe. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Can I
Representative.
want to say one more thing. I even remember I used to go to summer school. My mom would send me down south with my grandparents, and I mean, I had no one to play with but my thoughts. But I remember down the street there was a school, and they had summer school, and I wanted to go, and I didn't think of it as I'm dumb or I'm failing, or, you know, that's how our kids see summer school now. But what if summer school was a place where you went to learn how to cook? You know, the things that you don't learn during the regular curriculum, during the regular year. Why don't we have a summer program for kids to go to? You know, that's something parents certainly don't have to worry about where their kids are, whether they're at work. You know, I learned how to ring a register, and, you know, I learned so much. How to sew. I learned how to sew. These are things that I wasn't learning in school. So, I mean, just little things like that. Like, I don't know, I'm not a congresswoman, but I mean, I couldn't imagine that being to it. I mean, when it comes to children, no expense is too expensive, in my opinion, because we're saving our future.
Thank you. So when, I guess back in the 70s and maybe 80s, we even had different relationships between our youth and the police. They had PAL. Mm-hmm. We don't have PAL anymore.
Right. We had Officer Friendly when I was.
We had Officer Friendly. Oh, absolutely. And we had the Boys and Girls Centers were really geared up.
Yep.
And we had the Ys. And we had enrichment programs. And we had the OJT programs, give you a stipend and teach you a trade. And we also had, in the state of New Jersey, for children who were having difficult times in their communities, a girls' school and a boys' school. Mm-hmm. And they were residential in nature, but they belonged to the Department of Education, not the Department of Criminal Justice, not the Department of Corrections. So these conversations that we're having today are very important as we, as appropriators, are looking at the money that is given to various departments as discretionary money to create more programs. I have to tell you, there's more money than we know about. And so we need to figure out how to push that information out into the community so those that are interested in presenting and providing these services know that there's a resource here for this. And I'm committed to that as a new member of the Appropriation Committee. I keep looking at my working group here because...
I need to look at them too.
Yeah.
Where's that money?
Yeah. No, they're going to push us to find the money, you know? They have the ideas and the evidence-based programs from the research and the work that they've done. And I know Dr. Lindsay's going to be at your conference tonight, as I am. Thank you for the invitation. I want you to talk a little bit about it because I think it's just huge and brilliant and decent.
Thank you. So the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, we are having our first benefit dinner fundraiser this weekend. It's over a period of 3 days, today, tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday. And we have different panels. We're raising money, so bring some money. We have tapped into all of our resources putting this thing together. Layla wasn't cheap, Hathaway. Anyway, but it's just our first initiative to to get the word out about what this foundation is about and what we're doing and what we will achieve, because this is my life mission. I know it. I tweeted something early today. You know, God calls on us all to fulfill a purpose that is much bigger than ourselves. And I used to think it was acting. No, it's this. It's definitely this. And I found my way to this through acting.
He
To the
blessed
mission.
so that you could bless.
Yes. Because
He
if you're
enlarged-
blessed, you got to be a blessing.
He enlarged your territory.
Yes.
So that you could be a bigger blessing.
Absolutely.
I agree with you 100% about purpose, and I also believe to whom much is given, much is required. And if you do that, it just keeps rolling.
Yes.
I know we have to let you go. I wanted to ask my colleagues if they had one short question to ask of you.
I'll make it short. You know, members of Congress tend to make speeches rather than ask questions. I'm concerned about trauma and violence in our community and its possible contribution to suicides that we are seeing with young people. Do you have any comment on that?
I mean, again, we have to get in the communities. That's a huge problem. I mean, how do we stop our kids from killing each other? They need something to do. I mean, I just think if we get all of this idle time off of these babies' hands and give them something constructive to do, something constructive and creative to think about, you know, they've taken everything, you know, fun out of school, music. You know, I remember I loved learning to bang on bells. I wasn't, you know, really talented when it came to the ivory and the piano, but I loved my bells. But you know, I just think school is daunting for children, you know, especially creative minds, because I was certainly a creative mind, and the art saved my life. And so if we can't implement it into school, then where are our community centers for our creative children to go after school so they can feel comfortable, so they can thrive? So I think that's where we start, with somewhere for our children to be, so that they don't have idle time to think of ways to destroy each other.
Congresswoman, final comment?
I just wanted to say just how amazing it is to see you here talking about this issue. For the time Charmaine and his colleagues spend talking about this issue, and others who are bucking the stereotype that our communities don't talk about this. And I really appreciate your strength, all of your strengths, in being vulnerable. And that means I know a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to everyone else who feels like they need someone to say it so that they can say it themselves. Yes. And I just finally wanted to say, the Black Caucus has been on tour visiting different districts. They will be in my district end of August, and we will be talking about mental health in the Black community. Kendrick Sampson has agreed to come in and be part of that conversation. And I'm hoping you and Charmaine will join us and be part of that conversation as well. In Minnesota, we do amazing things, and we are usually the leading state for healthcare. But mental health in the Black community is one we're not leading in. And I would love you guys to come and help us do that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I know that each and every one of us, if we were honest, would recognize and say that we've had moments of depression and we've had moments of anxiety. How we've been able to navigate them distinguishes us from someone who's had to continue on with whatever. I mean, we've all gone through something. We're Black in America and women. Having the opportunity to have our children feel comfortable about having these concerns, these issues, these feelings, and recognizing that it places no negative impact on their value, because they're so important to us. That's like God's work. And so I thank you for using your celebrity and your resources to work in this space and to open up these conversations so that we can all have the kind of future for our children that not only do we want from the heart, but we need it for the country to be healthy. I thank you very much, and I don't know if you have a parting comment?
I just want to thank you for allowing me this space to be vulnerable and to speak about something that I'm very passionate about. I am here for you. It takes a village. I'm certainly a part of that village. I want change, and I want to take care of our babies. So in any way you need me, I'm here for you.
Oh, thank you. That's on the record, everybody. So now I am going to ask for my sisters and my brothers who are in the audience to respect the fact that Taraji P. Henson has a place she has to get to right away. So I'm going to ask if you would let her leave this room before you get up. Amen? You know, we hear that in church sometimes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You blessed us today.
Thank you.
I believe I have a solution for anyone who will hear it. I believe I have a solution for anyone who will hear it.